And welcome back, guys, to All Abilities No Filter. Thanks so much for choosing to spend time with us today. Whether you're on a long car ride, cleaning the house, or just bored and looking for something to do, we're happy to help any way we can. And we are beyond excited for today's conversation with Jennifer. This is a topic that we have kind of put out to the audience, and it is one of the most highly requested topics that we have felt out to people, and we are so excited to discuss it and talk about it. And you kind of got a good idea of what we're talking about with our with the intro to today's episode. So without further ado, we're just going to hop right into it. Jennifer, thanks so much for joining us today and taking time to be with us.
It is my pleasure. Thank you so much.
And if you don't mind, could you kind of give our listeners just your background, your experience, and just kind of what kind of has led you here today, just to kind of give them an idea of just what you've done in the past and what your experiences are? That would be awesome.
Absolutely. So my name is Jennifer Kaufman, and I am the principal at a school for learners with autism that range from ages 5 right up to 21. I am also the author of the book Grandparenting on the Spectrum because I'm also the grandmother of a 7-year old on the spectrum and who has autism, and that sort of led me to 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 all of this. I have a place down in South Jersey, right at the beach, and I noticed a couple of times police officers struggling to support lost kids, in particular, kids that are like wandering down the street with no shoes on and no shirt on. They've obviously come off the beach and they're unable to communicate. They're unable to let them know, like, I'm even lost. And seeing that going on and knowing that there's a lot of misinformation or lack of training about autism, I thought that that merging of my knowledge with first responders' needs would really um, be like the magic.
It's awesome. And it is, that is, and for the listeners that didn't catch our intro, our main thing that we're going to talk about with Jennifer today is her experience with working with first responders and training and coaching them on the things that they need to know or need to be aware of when working with adolescents, children, adults that are on the spectrum or any disability or just need a different approach than the typical person. And so that is what we've been so excited to get Jennifer on today, because I think just around the country, with even just the viewpoints and points of view when it comes to law enforcement and police, they are looked at to being held to a higher standard, to be able to interact, communicate, deal with any situation. You feel like they're there to protect and serve. So you're there to protect and serve every single person, no matter their language ability, communication ability, their cognitive abilities. They have to deal with so many different situations. But then you throw autism in there or any disability that heightens that sensitivity to really anything environmental. Then you're just kind of taking the manual and throwing it out the window, because you never know what type of person you're going to be supporting or protecting, because like you kind of said, it's a spectrum. They're going to react to things completely differently. But also autism isn't what I would consider typically a physical
Right.
type of disability or anything. You can't look at somebody and go, okay, I'm going to have to kind of check how I'm approaching and things like that, because it's hard sometimes to see the autism, especially in a high pressure stress situations like that. Um, so if you could, I would love just for you to kind of talk about your the first response autism that you do and kind of what it does. So we can kind of let the listeners kind of know just kind of what directions you take or what kind of your goals are. And then we can kind of get into what you really work hands on with the first responders.
Sure. So first response autism, firstresponsautism.com is my website. What I do is I go into communities. I also do it over Zoom, and I train groups of first responders, could be police officers, could be firefighters, um, on how to what support those people that you come across who might have autism. We talk about how to, how do you know somebody is autistic or neurodiverse versus somebody who might be under the influence of something. We talk about those signs. We talk about what is autism, and one in 31 people, one in 31 children in particular right now are diagnosed with autism. And what does that look like? There's a saying: you've got one person with autism, and you've got one person with autism. Meaning there are some commonalities, but each person presents differently, and the signs and the symptoms and the level of autism is different. So, you can have your knowledge, and I can provide that knowledge. Then in each situation, you sort of have to go, okay, what are we dealing with here?
So when you're first meeting a group of first responders or working with them right off the bat, and you can tell they're everything you're kind of saying is brand new to them. And Hannah and I, we actually kind of not to the severity of working with first responders, but we typically work with people that have no
Right.
experience working with autism. And we have to go into detail of if this happens, this is how you should approach it. What do you feel like is when you're doing your training or working with, what's kind of the number one thing you want to kind of hit on first? Because there's a lot of things that you if you don't get this across to them, nothing else is going to work. So what do you feel like is like the number one thing when you're working with first responders that have no experience with autism that you really try to get through to them before getting into the actual interactions they might have?
Or, well, I always start off asking if anybody knows somebody with autism. And almost 100% every time there's hands, and it's a family member, it's a loved one, it's a friend, it's somebody that is in their lives. So I think that being able to identify that it affects everybody. Well, we all need to know how to deal with people who have autism. Is a good starting point. It's a good jumping off point. And then we'll sort of break down what is autism and how it affects those social interactions and communication, because those are really the two primary areas that if an officer came across somebody who's struggling to communicate or communicating differently, or behaving differently, having that knowledge of, well, could this be autism, might help them better support the person that they're dealing with in a crisis situation.
Absolutely. Hannah and I, we deal with, or we work with children on the spectrum that have very severe behaviors. Like I said, we work with children that were kind of their last resort a lot of the time. And one of the factors that we have to work with our staff on is restraints, going hands on with um, patients and students. And when I was able to kind of sit down with a couple first responders before the episode, that was like the very first thing they talked about. It went from, I mean, I asked them the question of, we're doing this episode. I'd love to get your input. What would you like to learn? And before anything else, they went right into asking questions about restraining and things like that. And it took me aback because I'm just like, that should be the last thing we talk about. It should be, what can we do before we have to restrain? And what's kind of your thought on the need for, let's train in de-escalation, not just how to safely restrain someone with autism, but the other 95% of the de-escalation part of it.
That is an awesome point, and it's just really such an important point, because de-escalation should be the absolute last resort. It should be when they're in danger of harming themselves or somebody else. But that is after. implementing de-escalation techniques that I talk about when I talk to groups, because knowing that, a person might not be answering your questions because they're not being defiant. They're just unable to process, or they're unable to communicate. Maybe the individual might not understand negation. Being told not to do something. And maybe words need to be phrased in a different way for an individual to understand. There's just simple things like that. I was talking to a group yesterday, and I was just saying to them, people with autism, especially younger people, like high-fiving, they're always high-fiving at school. We're telling them, good job, high five. And um, even just saying to a person who's struggling, like, hey, buddy, you're doing a good job, give me a high five, can help to just de-escalate and bring that anxiety level, bring down the tension. Instead of saying, you're not listening to me, this is what I need you to do now. And maybe speaking in abstract terms, where a really simple command, like sit down, like it's a child, hold my hand, um, can help the person understand what a
That's such
responder
a good
wants them to
point.
do.
And I think, too, usually when a first responder comes to a scene, it is somewhat of an emergency or crisis situation. So emotions are already heightened. You know, people can be scared. And unfortunately, it's been our experience working with individuals with extreme behaviors that police get called because of their behaviors, which can lead to consequences. And that kind of creates this weird dynamic between, someone with a disability and law enforcement or first responders, because they view them as this disciplinarian figure or this scary figure, and they're associated with things like, jail or being handcuffed, and it can become really, really scary. And so, what is some advice that you might have for parents who, have individuals or kids on the spectrum, and they're like, I want to show that first responders are helpful people in the community. For an example, like one thing that I can think of, I am from a very small town, and my brother is a first responder. He's a firefighter, and they've started doing something called Touch a Truck. And it's like where kids can come, and they've got police cars and, fire trucks and helicopters and whatever. And it just kind of allows them to experience these trucks and these people in uniforms in a very comfortable setting. And it allows it to be kind of fun. It takes some of the strain out of that relationship.
Sure. Having meet and greets, touch a truck, just getting that interaction when it's not a crisis situation helps build those relationships, so that I don't know, the individuals, especially children, become more comfortable seeing police officers in uniform. But then the police officers might also become more comfortable with those behaviors. If it's a stim, if it's arm flapping, or vocalizations that might be loud or might be confusing to somebody who doesn't know that person. I think that that's a great way to build that bond and get each group used to
Sure.
the other.
We, yeah, I think that is awesome advice, because it's when we work with these kids and we put them in situations that they've never been in, and then they have a adverse reaction to it. We're like, well, what in the world is going on? Or we get impatient with that. But if we're not allowing someone with really anybody to become used to an environment before having expectations on them, what are we doing? Because if I know if I'm put into a situation I'm completely uncomfortable with, whether I have autism or not, I'm not going to probably respond the exact way people want me to respond. So being able just to slowly introduce things such as, like I said, the vehicles, the people in uniform, or what I've kind of seen is like the sirens. We have fire drills more than we want to have where we get to work with our kids. And the sirens are always the number one thing that we're trying to deal with, or the fire alarms going off. Um, I don't know if that's something you've talked to with first responders, excuse me. When it comes to the sensory overload, the yelling's never going to work. So if a kid is, or an adolescent or an adult or whatever, isn't doing what they're telling them to do right off the bat, how to keep them from raising their voice and causing that sensory overload to happen even quicker, because it is difficult to look at someone that their job is to protect people. Their job is to take situations and get them handled as quick as possible. But when you look at someone and go, okay, the more they scream at you, the quieter you have to be. The more animated they're getting with you, the more calm you have to be. That's really hard. What kind of things do you kind of tell them? Because it's difficult because they're used to responding almost the opposite way. If someone's getting violent, they got to jump in really quick and handle that hands-on quickly. But if it's someone with autism, you got to handle the environment, you got to handle everything like that. So, is that something you often have to kind of discuss with them as well?
Maybe something we discuss, and I feel like this is a good place to mention the Blue Envelope program. I'm familiar with it at all?
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So that's something we have here where I am, New Jersey, where if you're on the spectrum and you're driving a car, because there's all different levels of independence when someone has autism. But if you are pulled over and you're in this very high tense situation, because no one likes to get pulled over to begin with. But if you're unable to communicate effectively, the Blue Envelope program is an envelope in the glove box that you can take out and have your license, insurance, registration in there, hand it to the officer, and that signals to the officer that, hey, this person is dealing with something that um, I should know about. And it might have some information about that individual that they're unable to communicate, or what their behaviors might look like. And it will, help facilitate that piece, that communication, and hopefully prevent, lack of eye contact or answering an officer's question, because you know how fast you were going, and the person doesn't get an answer back. It's not that they're being contrary or difficult. It's just that they're unable to process the information that fast, or they're unable to communicate for whatever reason. So
It's
yeah,
I feel like they have to get rid of the idea of they're not complying and look at it, they can't comply. Um, so
you know what I like to say? They're not, and I can't take credit for this, but I hear it every once in a while. They're not giving you a hard time. They're
That's
having
so
a hard time.
good.
yes, absolutely. That is so. I mean, it really
Once
is. It's how difficult, and I know working in our environment it's so difficult to get people out of the mindset of it's my way or the highway. It's like even in the classroom, I work with educators all day, working in classrooms, and our environment that we work in is very different than a general ed classroom. We work in residential placement. We work in with a population is very different than anything a teacher that hasn't worked in this environment has ever dealt with. But if you know anything about teachers, we're very type A. We like things done our way. It's our classroom. It's going to be done our way. And it's very hard to break that mold. But when I get new employees and new teachers that come and work in our school, they have to learn that it's okay to adapt. It's okay to meet people halfway. It's okay to have some give and take. Um, and so, like, if a student wants to work on the floor instead of working at a table, that's okay. If they're going to do the work on the floor and not do it at the table, let's do it that way. And I feel like first responders, police officers, paramedics, they kind of have to have the same adjustment almost, because they're so used to, I'm the authoritarian here in this situation. It's got to be done my way. We have to follow these laws, I've been trained in this certain procedure, so we're going to handle it this way. But then autism gets thrown in there, and now they might have to veer. They might have to offer things that they're not used to offering different coping skills, bringing in the parents or allowing them to request things. Do they, whatever that may be? And do you kind of find it difficult sometimes that police officers or firemen kind of are a little adherent to being able to give and take with someone that they're having to deal with when they're on the spectrum or anything like that?
So it's interesting because I just had a conversation with an officer who's talking to me about a situation where a child was having a big behavior on a school bus. This officer had a relative with autism, and he said to me that, and he was sort of a newbie, but he was telling me what he observed. And what he had observed was they had taken the child with the behavior off of the school bus. And they, struggled to get him off of the school bus. And it was a very traumatic type of thing for everybody because they were other kids watching and looking on. And it was difficult because this child was fighting and really struggling and resisting being taken off the school bus. So the police officer said to me, is this right? Because this is my thought. He said, shouldn't it have been that they took all the kids off the school bus and then let the child who was having a difficult moment have his moment and de-escalate it so that, it would save to everybody a lot of trauma, like seeing this going on and maybe being afraid of the children. And I said, yeah, absolutely. In my school and our policy is we will move the other children to a different location and de-escalate the situation as best we can for 2 consecutive weeks. And yeah, just having that knowledge because it will just better support the
I
individual
completely
who's suffering.
agree.
Because again, it's not defiance. It's not defiance. It's a reaction to a
Right.
situation. It's a
We
little bit
use
different.
that same ideology of removing everyone else and letting that individual that's having a hard time kind of work through that and then bringing everybody back together. So, nobody wants to do a bad job or no one wants to feel, unequipped to do their job. And so I feel like when I was talking to some of the first responders, it's like they want to figure it out. They want to be able to better help serve this population of people. But it does kind of go against a lot of things that they're taught, right? Like they're taught to get in there as quickly as possible and to make these hard decisions and kind of be no nonsense about it. And sometimes when you're working with or dealing with people with disabilities, you kind of have to take a deep breath and talk slower, move slower, pull them away from the situation and talk to them privately and kind of redo that whole train of thought that you were, taught to do when going through training. So I can imagine it's hard to kind of break out of that way of thinking. Right.
Right. Well, you don't know what you don't know. So if you're taught to remove the threats or, that's what you're doing. You're just following what you've been taught to do. So hopefully trainings like mine can shift perspective a little bit. I Yeah, I think that it's just about education. I've talked to a lot of officers who say the extent of the autism education they get is like an online video and quiz. And so you don't have that dialogue and you don't get to talk about specific struggles that the officers are dealing with.
That's
I was talking.
Well, I was just
Oh,
gonna
go ahead, Em.
say, I was talking to some guys and that was their experience too. And not to call anybody out, but there's videos that you can choose in a database of these different trainings, and they're getting pressure from their boss to choose videos that are on different topics that are also relevant, but are not, working with individuals on the spectrum or with disabilities is not as perceived as a direct emergency or, something to really focus on rather than, for an example, how to, like, I don't know, pull somebody out of a car. Like there's different types of emergencies and they're both equally as important. And I know you have to prioritize, but what they were telling me is that they're getting kind of pressured to do other types of trainings before the trainings on working with people with disabilities.
And a lot of the strategies accommodating people with disabilities, accommodating people with autism are low cost. They're complicated. A lot of them are, yeah, they might be in opposition to what they do normally in the field. But I mean, even knowing that if somebody has a talker, like an assistive device to help them communicate, for as much as they can use the talker to talk to um, an officer in a crisis shot in the field, an officer can take the device and communicate back with the child or the person because that is a way of communicating that they're familiar with. And maybe, having a stranger talk to them is just a little too much, but having their own device request information or ask them their name would be a better way. And just knowing that, because again, if you don't know, you don't know. You don't know what you don't.
I was talking to just the group, like I said, I was talking before the episode, and they were. It's always a little refreshing talking to people that don't have a lot of experience in our fields, because when I asked them the questions, it was as blunt and as layman's terms as you can get. So one of the things I was asking him is like, well, what do you struggle with a lot of time? And one of them, he was a police officer, great guy, but he asked me, he says, well, what do I do when they're just freaking out for no reason? And I asked him, I was like, well, how do you know it's for no reason? And he's just like, because I can't ever see anything that's going on. And I said, and I had to look at him and go, well, okay, but if I took your brain and completely rewired it to where you're not thinking like you normally do, how do you know something's not going to freak you out? And it was kind of wild to look at their eyes. And when I kind of went in about just really the neurology of autism, and your brain's completely wired different. So when you look at a situation or a guy freaking out, as he put it, and you're not seeing the antecedent, you're not seeing the reasoning, therefore there is no reason. I don't see it, therefore it's not happening. Or he's like, well, they're not telling me anything. And I'm like, well, I looked at him, I was like, well, welcome to autism. I mean, like that's what we're trying to talk about.
Like the first, like rule number one is remember that behavior is communication.
Yeah. And I bet they couldn't fathom it's like a behavior, no matter the person you're dealing with, it's never a singular thing. Something has happened to make them act this way. And it is, and you can kind of talk to it too, is how important it is to teach people to be aware of triggers, to not automatically assume that they're getting angry for no reason. I mean, it could be as simple as, like, I was working with a student a few weeks ago. He's typically wonderful, but one morning he's having just a complete meltdown. And we really stood there and looked at each other and like, this is happening for no reason. And then someone that works with him all the time looked at us like we were stupid and took the back of his shirt and flipped it up, and no one removed the tag from the back of his shirt. So he's kind of in a complete visceral reaction to just not having the tag removed. She took it off, looked at us like we're crazy, and he was fine. So is it in your experience important to teach these people even just a list of triggers, almost like these are sensory issues you need to check off before escalating the situation further? Look at your environment going around, or just looking at the person and allowing them to kind of explain why they're upset, but also validating why they're upset. Because if the kid that I worked with looked at me and goes, he just threw a pencil at me because of the tag on the back of his shirt, I can't look at him and go, well, that's a stupid reason to get upset. Because to him, it's horrible. He was completely uncomfortable. And to me, to completely invalidate his reason for being upset can be detrimental to the future if another officer tries to go and de-escalate when he has that experience of, well, you don't care why I'm really upset. So in your experience, is that pretty prevalent of trying to assess it before reacting to it?
Yeah, and that's something I talk about a lot is just how to de-escalate the situation by making shifts in the environment, and by really importantly talking and listening to the caregivers, the parents, the friends, whoever is with that individual. Because, sometimes in the fields, the instinct might be to clear everyone away. We're just going to deal with this one person. But if it's one person that has people who can advocate for it and say, hey, this is what he does when he gets upset, or this lights are too bright, or the sounds are too many people standing around, then the responding officers can adjust the environment so that the person struggle is
So,
just a
what
little
are some
less.
questions that parents can ask, or what are some questions that first responders can ask parents to better help figure out a way to work with somebody with a disability? Yes.
You mean in a crisis situation? I I think asking, um, in terms of communication, how do they communicate? Can you help and assist us in communicating with this person? If a behavior is happening, they can ask about what was going on before, that this person might be responding to. You know, and let me tell you, there can be behaviors, as you know, that are from sensory overload. But people with autism can have tantrums too because they're unhappy because they asked for something at the
Right.
mall and they didn't get it. So understanding and covering this a lot, the difference between like a tantrum versus a sensory overload meltdown where supporting a person that way, it's very different. And I know we don't have a lot of time to go into that. But even just understanding that, like basically, I mean, listening to the people that are with the individual and like providing with the support and not
Right.
blaming them. Right. So people with autism have a tendency to elope and not blaming the parents. Well, who was watching? Well, why didn't you do X, Y, and Z? Why was he outside without any shoes? That would not be the time and place during crisis when you're looking for a lost individual to be beyond the family. But using the family or the friends as resources, caregivers, as resources to better support the officers and the else is really something that shouldn't be overlooked.
Absolutely. And I think also one thing that I know they struggle with, because coming from them, not making assumptions, is, and it was a fair question when they asked me this. It was, well, how in the world do we know he's autistic or not? And I'm like, that is a fair point, because we have so many misdiagnoses, or we have so much self-diagnosing, or it is, and I hate to say, autism is getting to be a little trendy nowadays with the TV shows, or when people want to make comments such as, oh, that's just my autism, when they're no formal diagnosis, but they feel like they don't like loud noises, that's autism. But what signs or characteristics or anything do you tell first responders, um, just to kind of look at, whether it's just looking how the person's acting, how they're reacting to what they're saying? Because it was a fair question. They're like, well, are we supposed to know when they have autism or not?
Right. Right. So with autism, you have that social piece, the lack of eye contact, the communication differences. So, if somebody's under the influence, they might be slurring their speech. They might not be speaking coherently, but somebody who has autism, it's very different. It's, and I can't really speak for everybody, but they might be communicating in a way that is not slurred speech, but it might be repetitive speech, or it might be unclear speech. Very different. They might be reacting to bright lights. They might be reacting to the sirens. They have trouble making eye contact with you. Whereas, somebody under the influence who's asked to do a sobriety test in the field might have trouble walking a straight line, but they're trying to walk the straight line. A person with autism, when it has to do a sobriety test, might just go walking off on their own and completely, completely disregard what was asked of them because that's autism, right? That's
Yeah,
that's what
you're exactly right. Because when they asked me what things you look for, and I kind of told them, and their response was, "Well, we see that in a lot of drunk people, and we see
That's a
that,"
really good
and I'm
point.
like that. I mean, that is true. That is true. I just, but it also you have to look at the other things are. It's kind of like what we teach our staff. If they're not being aggressive towards you, or if they're not an immediate threat, you can slow down. You can go through some things. You can make sure of things. It's also okay to look at them and go, "Do you have autism?" In my experience, people that have autism, they'll tell you they have autism, or things like that, or ask just getting them to answer questions or anything like that to where you can get information from them. Because typically people with autism, they retain things fairly well, so they can tell you things. But it's okay with looking at someone and ask them, "Do you have this disability? Do you have autism?" I personally think it should be in the handbook where you're doing it. It should be part of the questions you ask, because it's no harm. People either going to say yes or no, but
you
it is
know
that
what I want
way.
to share. You know what I want to share too. That's been to me, to your listeners,
Yeah.
is that allowing, if you suspect autism, allowing the processing time after you answer a question
Mhm.
is so crucial because, you ask the individual their name and say what you mean, but they don't respond. And they want, why are you here? What happened? You're, you're peppering them with questions and you're not giving them time to respond. And they need time to respond. It might have extended, it might take a minute to get an answer. Or you might go on to the second question, but they're now responding to the first question that you asked. So there's that and being aware of that. And yeah, like you said, slowing down and taking a step back and just allowing um, the processing time and allowing the answers to flow
Sure.
and not being in
But
much.
yeah, in my experience, asking questions at a rate that's appropriate, giving them time is always such a tool to de-escalate. Because one, you can ask questions to figure things out, but what I use them all the time for is just distraction. It's just if I can see they have Spider-Man on their shirt, I will ask 1,000 questions about Spider-Man. And police officers and any first responders, they're always trained to be
Right.
hyper observant. But to teach them is like when they're doing it, look at the person, look what they have in their hand. A lot of the kids we work with always has something in their hand, whether it's a stuffed animal, it's some type of a coping item or whatever it is, where you can ask a million questions off of it. And getting them away from the primary situation that is already so stressful to getting to something they're more comfortable with is always very useful. But again, it takes that slow down. You don't have to read the Miranda rights right then and there. You can slow down and be observant of what's going on. And that I feel like when I kind of spoke to them about that, that was one that clicked a little bit to them because they're just trained to respond and to react and things like that. But to let that person react, then you react to them. It's just kind of like figuring things out, not expecting them to follow the same line of questioning or follow the same directives that everyone else has to follow. But I feel like that's almost anybody going to work with autism really needs to learn, because if you treat a person with autism like a general person, you're just in for a world of frustration and escalation um, a lot of the time. Um, but yeah, I agree completely. If they're not willing to kind of, like you said, slow down, observe the situation, and kind of almost cater to what they're needing, uh, as opposed to just handling the
Mhm.
situation as quickly as possible. For that, absolutely. But well, I tell you, I mean, like I said, this has been a conversation that I've been looking forward to having, and it's just taking in so much information because it's something everyone deals with all over the country, all over the world. It's autism is not centralized to one region of the world; it's everywhere. And the first responders are everywhere, so they got to learn to mingle. They got to um, learn how to interact, but also we have to teach the people with the autism or any disability how to interact with the first responders as well. Is there anything you talk to parents about how to relay that information to children or adolescents, that when you see a police officer in this uniform, we do what they say, we comply with their warning, but they're also a person you can go to for anything. That's the safe person you need to go to. Is there anything you kind of talk to parents about like that?
Well, I mean, we always encourage our clients to, as Hannah had mentioned, the culture talk days, the meet and greets, and positive reinforcement about police officers are there to help you. If you see a police officer and ask for your ID, that's something they train our kids at school to understand that they have their wallet and they know their ID if they're asked for their ID. Um, this is it's that familiarity that we will help kids to understand.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'll never forget when I was in high school. It's kind of how I got started in this, where we had our the programs where you can go into the special ed room, be volunteers. I did that my freshman year, did it all the way through senior year with Special Olympics and everything. And one of the people that kind of showed me how to interact with them and that population with autism, Down syndrome, what anything, was the resource officer at my high school, because he was just so engaging with them and interacting with them, and just he was so excited to see them and they were so excited to see him. And he did a lot of discussions with parents and things like that of how to interact with law enforcement. And I think that's just so important. It's like if you have availability to a resource officer in the school or something like that, I mean, that's an officer they're going to see every day. They're going to see that uniform every day. And you could tell his presence was a huge difference maker for them, because it was no longer this big scary cop. It was just Officer Richards, our best bud that comes and eats lunch with us or comes to Special Olympics with us and things like that. And he's always so excited to see them. So that just made me think of that, because I will just, if they have the ability to be around it, they should take advantage of it a lot. And I know some schools kind of do with their resource officers and things like that, but I think we can all agree on there's not enough training. There needs to be more. It needs to be implemented more into policy. But I do encourage parents and listeners to take just take advantage of programs like Jennifer's. Programs of anything in your area. Look for it. If you have family members that are first responders, use them. They're your family members. They got to help you. That's an obligation, and everything like that. But and we're gonna put all your information, Jennifer, on our website as well. So listeners, please go to that. But I know we're kind of wrapping up. But Jennifer, is there anything else you would like our listeners to know? Please plug away anything you have, or more advice. Like I said, please share.
There's one thing that I want to mention that I mention every single time I'm public speaking, and that is 2024 data on fatalities by cause. 91% of fatalities with people with autism is drowning. People with autism many of them are attracted to water, bodies of water, be it the ocean, a lake, a swimming pool. And if the if the individual elopes and goes missing, head to the water, have somebody go and look at bodies of water, and if you want someone in your life that you love that has autism or is neurodiverse, make sure that you get them the biggest lessons. It's good job.
That's awesome. I think Hannah and I can agree. Where we get to work with these kids, we do have bodies of water near us. We also have a indoor swimming pool for the kids, and their obsession with both is amazing. So I can absolutely relate to that as well. But can you tell our listeners where to find your other materials with the other call to action things you've been working on? Because we'd love to put that on the website as well.
Sure. They can visit my website or purchase my book on Amazon, Grandparenting on the Spectrum, A Journey Through Both Sides of the Desk. My website there is grandparentingonthespectrum.com. And my first responder website is firstresponseautism.com. Please feel free to reach down, even if it's just to say hi.
Absolutely. And we're going to be doing future episodes on extended family with autism. And I'm going to hope I can call on you for that as well, just to pick your brain up,
And that's
more expertise in anything like that as well. But listeners, thank y'all so much again for being with us today. Hannah and I have enjoyed speaking with Jennifer, but also being able to take the time with you guys. Please go to our website, allabilitiesnofilter.com, where you can find all this amazing resources we've been talking about, but also leave messages, leave comments, leave questions. This is just one episode where we have structured around your questions, because what matters most to us is what you guys are going through or information you guys feel like you need. Jennifer, thank you again. Listeners, thank you again, and stay tuned for future episodes. But until then, we just can't wait to get together again for our next unfiltered conversation. Thanks, guys.